Yo, what up, good people? I want to talk about team playstyles and how they don't stay consistent after roster changes because I believe this narrative is kind of being perpetuated a little bit too much and saying that teams are stylistically the same year after year. And I don't think that's necessarily the truth, even if the coaching staff stays the same. I think still it mostly relies on the players themselves that actually give the team their identity rather than any of these other external factors. And so when you look at these different teams that have characteristics that have been mentioned by the public or by analysts, you think of teams like SKT and how they have great macro and they're good at winning team fights late game, or you think of Cloud9, how they play only through the mid lane, which most certainly is not the case. Even this year, they didn't play through the mid lane. It was Jensen who specifically went out to other lanes in order to help top lane or help bottom lane. And so it wasn't just this Jensen show that happened last year. And then you have CLG and how they're synonymous with split pushing to always outtrade the enemy team, and whatever decision that you make, you're always going to lose something on the other side of the map against Darshan. And that's not been the case at all this year either. And the team has been largely in shambles, and they don't look like they actually have any type of plan or any type of coordination when it comes to a team identity. And then you have TSM and turning up for playoffs. And yes, this can be somewhat true because they are a veteran team, so you expect veterans to be able to step up when it comes to higher pressure games and them to perform and also to step up practice in order to kind of best themselves from the previous regular season and go into playoffs looking stronger, which I mean, rip TSM now that we know, but also how TSM has been said to play through the mid lane a lot, and I think that is still fair, and I think that is actually a reoccurring attribute, mainly because they kind of have the same player, Bjergsen, and him also having this kind of stigma of using his jungler as a ward. I think that's a little bit different because although yes, it does kind of affect the entirety of TSM, that more so is a statement towards how Bjergsen wants to play the game. And since he's been, the longest standing person within the team now, he's able to actually affect the team and affect how they want to play the game. So I think that's a fair criticism to say, or a fair team identity to say, at least for TSM specifically. But I think play styles are attributed to players themselves, and so one thing you could see is Dardoch being unable to play tanks, but now he has changed that completely, right? This is a good example of a player changing their play style to suit their team instead. And players might have to play a certain play style because it's necessary to the team, right? It's necessary for them to be a cohesive unit. And you can see that with Faker and how he plays this aggressive play style and kind of disrespectful to the enemy mid laner. But that's only because none of the other lanes really are playing risky. Even the jungler isn't playing risky, at least back in the day. But maybe that's now why we see SKT in shambles, is because Faker's playing risky and yet his jungler's playing risky, and then you have the bot lane who is just stagnant, and they're supposed to be this this rock down below to where, well, if things go wrong for Faker in the mid lane, he can kind of ease back his aggression and then just let Bang carry towards the late game. And then you have a player like Aframu, who is kind of synonymous with initiation champions. But this is also because his team requires this initiation because he's this primary voice for the team, right? And so it makes the most sense that the person that is shot calling is then on an initiation champion to make the calls a little bit more fluid and to allow the team to kind of rally around him and his champion specifically within the entire game. And then, just player identities. Players have identities, but teams specifically do not. And it's all about how a team enables these strengths or these weaknesses and how to cover up these weaknesses of other players. It's about mixing and matching these two in order to then create this team identity. But it's not created just out of thin air. It's literally created out of matching these strengths and weaknesses between these players and kind of tweaking them slightly. But overall, you aren't going to get rid of them overnight. And that may also allude to a problem of teams not sticking around long enough with a primary roster. Most rosters only last about a year, and then something drastic happens and they change out one or two players or the whole roster. So what I would like to see is coaches influencing playstyle more, because like I said, players don't stick on a team long for that often anymore. And coaches can kind of point out a weakness of their players and have them work on that instead of covering up the weakness with another player's strength. And so over time, you can kind of build against these weaknesses so that you have a more well-rounded player. And so therefore, that also enables his other teammates to not have to cover up that weakness, and now they can play their own game, they can play their own style and actually dictate what's happening around the map around them too. And so you have this other strength that you can kind of fully bolster up instead of playing catch up and having someone else sacrificing a part of their play in order to shore up someone else's. So that's what I would like to see. But I think this whole narrative that team playstyle identities are actually a big thing and a big influence is ridiculous, especially after multiple roster changes, because I don't think the infrastructure or the staff has that much influence, especially over a short amount of time.